If you're trying to get your scenes to stand out more, it's all about the details. In this new series I'm starting, I'm going to be showing you how to take fair use images, fair use photographs from online and create models directly from those images. No Photoshop necessary. All done in Blender, along with teaching you how to create a asset library out of those assets. Follow along as we create this electrical box, this gas gauge, and this garage door, and learn how to take your scenes to the next level with high detail, low poly models. Let's get into how I made this object. First things first, let's import an image. So I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm going to come down to Image and Mesh Plane. And we are going to go to my Street Assets folder. These are the images that I am going to create objects based off of. Again, these are up on Pexels. So if you want to download these images, check the link in the description of the video. Let's start with this one. Import image as plane. And here is our image. Now, one thing that I really want to do is I want to hit edit first off and come up to options and make sure I have correct face attributes select. So what that's going to do is when I move a vertice here, it's not going to start to stretch my UVs, right? So if I don't have that on, then when I move a vertice, it's going to move the UVs along with it. This can be useful in this kind of situation where we are using an image to create an object and we're modeling around the texture that's already on our geometry. In most other situations of modeling, this will not be useful. So let's just start by scaling this down. That should be good. Scale it on the x-axis here and zoom in a little bit. GX and GZ. Well, let's just grab these top two and GZ. Now we do happen to have this lock, and in the Photoshopped version that I have, I did use Photoshop to remove this lock, but I don't think it will be that big of an issue. So we can make some simple extrusions to try and get this to look okay. In order to do that, let's hit Control R while we're in edit mode, and let's add a loop cut here. And let's add another one right there. And one more in this vertical kind of slice here, and GG, and move this over like that. GG, let's move this down. GG, let's move it back up. We can add one more loop cut here just to make sure that the geometry isn't going to be looking too wacky. And I do think that this will end up looking just fine in the end. Again, this is going to be low poly. It's going to be at the back of your scene on the wall. It's not going to really be taking up too much space in the front of scene. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move this out on the x-axis right about there. And let's just add one more loop cut here to make sure that this, I'm going to go G, Z, G, X, just so that we are making sure that our geometry is semi-decent, or what's shown is semi-decent, right? So now that we have that done, before we move forward, I would like to create these holes just to add some depth into it. As you can see, we have stuff that's a little bit closer and some gaps that are a little bit farther. So what I'm going to do, and this might make a lot of people cringe, let's say that. Let's select this face and we're going to hit Inset. And we're going to go GZ to bring that down. I'm going to hit 2, GZ to bring this down. I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to go scale on the x-axis. Just bring that in. Take this one, GX. Let's bring that in. This is not going to be really perfect. We're going to scale this or rotate this on the Y. Just try and line it up as much as we can. And we're going to rotate this on the Y as well. And GX, let's bring that in. Take this one down, GZ, GX. That should be fine. Now, I'm going to hit Control R to create loop cuts. And this will make your mesh quite messy. This is a cube in the end. So a cube is fine. It will shade just fine. I'm going to ramp up the number of cuts that I'm making here to match the number of bars that we have there on the grate. And I'm going to try and do my best to just eyeball lining them up. We're going to do that again for the sides, which we have 4. Boom, let go. Now with these selected, I'm going to go 3, and I'm just going to Control Shift select all of these. I'm going to hit inset with the letter I, and then I'm going to hit inset again, same letter I. So you're pressing I twice to inset each individual face, and I'm going to click once I add a little bit of an inset there. Now what I want to do is I want to hit extrude, and I want to take these back just a little bit, very slightly. Now that I've taken them back slightly, I'm going to deselect by holding shift and clicking on these ones right here, because I want these ones to be a little bit closer. They're just a little bit of detail that I believe is up closer to the surface. And so I'm going to deselect those. I might deselect that one as well. Now I'm going to hit GY and move these other ones further back. And that just creates a kind of a false sense of depth there that will look just fine in that final render when you're passing by, right? No one should be getting this close to this asset. This should just be back on a wall off in the distance like this. And so now that we have that done, I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to hit all. Actually, I'm going to hit 2, and I'm going to try and select the whole outer frame here. Now that I have that selected, I'm going to hit extrude, and we're going to go on the y-axis. And maybe about that long. That should be about right for a lockbox like this. And on this back area, I have it added to my quick favorites, but you can also search it grid fill. I just hit grid fill and it should just fill up. You do have other controls on how you want the grid to be filled. I like this. It's just a cube. It should work just fine. So that's the main step here. This is almost completely done besides a little bit of UV work that we need to do. That being said, let's come in here to our lock, and I'm going to move this up. I'm going to go GG and just move it up to about there. I'm going to hit 3. I'm going to select these faces right here, and I'm going to just extrude these out just a little bit and rotate on the x-axis just a little bit like that. And that will just pop it out. It's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it is done, right? And this is also tilted a little bit just from the image. So we can also rotate on the Z and just add that tilt back in just slightly to give a little bit of realism to it. Again, this topology does not need to be very clean. It can totally be a little bit messy. This is just going to be sitting in the background. Let's get this side of this box fixed, and this will be relatively easy to do. We're going to hit 3 on our numbers to get the face selection. I'm going to Alt select one of those edges, which will select that whole ring. I'm going to hit U, and I'm going to hit Cube Projection. And down here, I already have my UV editor selected and open on the image that we're using. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go All by hitting A, Scale, and GY. Just move it up along that, Tab, and now we have a nice unwrapping of this. Now we do have some bump going on here, and we can fix that. That will be relatively easy to fix. All we have to do here is go Control R, add a loop cut here, bring this in to just this edge right here, and then I am going to take this and this, and I'm going to scale it on the x-axis to, ooh, that doesn't work. Scale x0. That's going to line it up, and GX. Just get this about right there. We can also use this to make sure that we're lining things up properly. GX, that should be totally fine. And this looks just fine. I don't see a reason why we would need to add much detail to that. But now that we have this built, we can bring our wall back in just like the beginning of our video here. And you can see what it looks like on a wall. Let's move this closer to right about there. a couple things I'd like to do on the shader editor aspect of this just to take it to the next level. So let's frame our selected. First thing is this is made out of metal. So let's crank that metallic up. You don't have to go all the way to 1. I think because it is metal, you could go all the way to 1. That's totally fine. Another thing I want to do is I want to add some bump in. So I'm actually going to shift D on this image. I'm going to hit this 2 so that it's not selected on that. And any changes I make here aren't going to edit the color channel. I'm going to come down to the second one. I'm going to click non-color in the color space selection. And we're going to send this into a color ramp. And we're going to send this into a bump height. And the bump height is going to go into the normal. And what this is going to do is it's going to add a lot of detail in to our scene. But this is a little too much detail in my opinion. Also, my sun is really reflecting pretty annoyingly off of this. It's pretty bright. I'm also going to set the strength down to 0.4. It seems to be a little bit easier to see things. So down here on this bump map, I'm going to take the distance down to 0.02. And that just lowers that distance down a little bit. And then I'm also going to take the strength down a decent amount because there's no reason to have it so high. I feel like it wouldn't be that scuffed in real life. The bump would probably be more something around like this. The roughness is going to be to taste. The lower you set the roughness, the more of a mirror you're going to have here, and the more it's going to really reflect your scene. I believe since it's been outside and it looks pretty scuffed, that it will actually be decently rough. So I'm going to have this up quite a decent amount. I'm going to remove the alpha here. There is no alpha channel on this image. It's all just color. And the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to insert by hitting Shift A, and I'm going to add a hue saturation value node in between the color image and the principled BSDF. This gives us a little bit more control over our brightness of our object. So I believe it wouldn't be as bright of an object, so I am going to drop that down to about 0.31. And that it kind of just darkens the metal a little bit, makes it look a little bit more weathered. And in order to make this a asset for your library later, you can come up to your object, you can right-click it and click Mark as Asset. And wherever this Blender file is saved, that will now be accessible as a part of your asset library. So to set up your asset library, you can come to Preferences under Edit, and under the File Paths section, you have your asset libraries. And by clicking on this, you can go find a new folder telling Blender, hey, look for assets and blend files in this location. And if you have specific folders for specific projects, like I'm only creating my street assets in a street asset folder, then when I come to my asset library, my asset browser here, I can come down to my street assets, and I know that all of my assets are going to be in there, all of my handmade assets. But let's move on to the next object that we're going to create. The second asset we will make today is the garage door. This is really useful for populating your scenes with details that look realistic, but also kind of subconsciously just sit in the background. So we will hit Shift A, come down to Image, Mesh Plane, Street Assets, and we will come down to this image here. I'm going to hit Tab for Edit. I'm going to make sure that Correct Face Attributes is on. Let's start by kind of masking this out here. I'm going to hit 1 to get into Vertex Select mode while in Edit, and we're just going to slide this down. I'm going to hit A for all, GZ. Actually, Tab, GZ. Let's get this kind of in the center of our scene here. I'm going to scale it up a little bit as well. GZ. There we go. Now it's really in the center of our scene. Anytime we scale outside of edit mode, we want to set our scale. And so I hit Control A and hit Set Scale. So we're going to go back into edit mode here. And let's select these two vertices, GX. And let's just make sure we're not cropping too much here. That should be fine. Let's grab these two vertices, GZ, and let's get this set to right about there. Now, I do want these bottom ones to be up to right there, and these two to be set just to the edge, so GX, and we'll do that. That looks great. I'm liking how that looks. Now we are cropping out a couple of the details here. This does shoot off of the image a little bit, so that's okay. We will add a loop cut and drag this up to here. That's just fine. And we're going to do one more loop cut here because we have this right here that we're going to want to extrude. We also are going to Control R, loop cut vertically, right there. Control R again, loop cut vertically, right there. And I think that looks pretty good as far as the loop cuts we're going to need for this. So first thing I want to do when it comes to extruding these is I want to grab all of these and extrude them all at the same length out. So we're going to hit extrude and pull it out. Probably about that much should be fine. That should be fine. And then I'm going to deselect these two bars here because this top part sticks out more than the other parts. We're going to hit extrude again, and it's going to come out just a little bit. And the last thing I want to do is this right here sticks out both here and here. So I'm going to take this and this, and we're going to go Alt-E for extrude faces along normals, and we're just going to slightly bring that out. That's all that we're doing there. Now, we do have an edge here that's not lined up with the edge that we're seeing, so I'm going to hit 2 in edit mode, GX, and we're going to bring that over, and then I'm also going to take this GX, and we're going to move that over like that. That should be fine. We have a lot of stretching with our UVs, but as we saw in the last object, very easy to fix. Another thing we have down here is this is supposed to be underneath the door, and so we don't want to be showing what's there, right? Like that doesn't make sense. So I am going to take the knife tool with K. I'm going to just select right here, and I'm going to come down to there and hit enter, and we're just going to delete this face. So I'm going to hit 3, select face, X, F. So XF is quick way to remove faces. Now this is already looking like a good garage door, but we can, like we did in the electrical box, we can add some detail in. So what I'm going to do here is first get these UVs fixed. We don't want this stretching here. So I'm going to select this edge with 3. So I'm in face select mode. And then I'm also going to select this edge by holding Shift Alt select. And that way we are grabbing pretty much almost all of our faces that have, I had to click that one, stretch normals. I'm going to hit U, unwrap, cube projection. And now here we can come down to our UV editor and we can see where this is projecting from. I'm going to hit A for all, rotate by 90, and we're just going to scale this down and just set it somewhere like right there. GX scale. That should be fine. We can also scale it on the Y axis to take up more and have a little bit more variation. I don't want it on there, so I'm going to go G, Y, and we're just going to drag it down a little bit. And that is a great way to just get those UVs set up to look a little bit more realistic. I'm liking how that's looking. Now, just like we did in the last one, we're going to want to set the detail, the bump on this to make it really pop. And one way that we do that is by going to our shader editor. We're going to Shift D on this image. We're going to hit the 2 first. Then we're going to take the color out to a color ramp and the color of the color ramp out to a bump height. And that bump height goes right into the normal. As you can see, looks we're getting that bump now, but this is set to sRGB. We need to go to the color space. We need to set this to non-color. And we need to take this distance down to 0.02 and the strength down to 0.31. That seems to be the most realistic that I've noticed if you're just trying to get some nice metal details on your metal. Another thing, if you're getting kind of pixelation here, another thing you can do is you can come down from linear and go to closest, and that will kind of smooth things out. You'll get rid of some of that pixelation. And let's look at this top up here. One thing I don't like is I feel like the chipped paint is poking out. So what I want to do is I want to try and invert that. And so I'm going to swap these two colors here. And that seems to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now we have some bump added to our object. And the last thing I want to do is I'm going to come here to the modifier tab, and we're going to grab a bevel modifier. Select a bevel modifier. And I'm really not seeing that bevel do anything, so we can always change it to %. And that looks a lot better. So let's add a small bevel here, 1%. We'll round it off with 3 segments. And that just helps your object catch the light on the corners a little bit more, makes it look a little bit more realistic with that bevel. And so this is one of the more simple objects to add to your scene. Now, one way that you can get, I'm going to remove this alpha, one way that you can get really cool control over this is if you go Shift A and you go to a hue saturation node and you add that in between the color channel and the principled BSDF. And let's get this sun cranked back up a higher elevation to really see what we're working with here. And with this, you will be able to change the color of the paint on the door. If you go too saturated with this, it can make the metal look a little funky, but it's just something to keep in mind that you can control the door simply. You can also drop the value down, and let's set this back at 0.5. Another thing I would like to do is take this roughness up a little bit. And so even though this is made out of metal, we don't want it too shiny. It's obviously quite beat up. So that's a great way to add a realistic door or doors to your scenes without adding a bunch of geometry to your scenes. And again, to add this to your library, you come down, you mark it as an asset and save your project. And then if the project is saved in the right file location, you can then access it. Let's move on to the next object. For the third low poly object that we are going to make in today's video, we are going to make this gas gauge. It's a very simple object, again, low poly, not even the best geometry, but when sitting at the back of a scene, you're not going to notice, and it's a great way to add some detail into your scenes. That being said, let's get started. First things first, let's add that image mesh plane in. Come down to our picture of a gas gauge. That has been brought in here. Now we're going to go into edit mode and do our normal cropping. Let's bring that in, bring that up, bring this over, bring this over. We can crop a little bit of that out. We will end up adding some loop cuts here. Control R, set that there. Control R, set that there. Bring this one up to about there. And we'll go to GG. Bring this down to here. Now, this and this can be scaled in. GZ. Rotate Y, just get them lined up. These two right here, GZ, scale X, and just get those slightly lined up. Now we are going to want to extrude this here, but first let's work on these corners, take this and this, and let's go scale GZ. Let's take this one in a little bit as well, GX, and that looks great. This one can GZ, GX, and that looks just fine. Now we do have a little bit here that we would like to extrude. This does kind of pop out in the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Control R. We're going to add a loop cut right here on this line, and we're going to go to 3, take these two, and I'm going to go inset just to about there. And then I am going to go GY, inset, GY, inset, GY. And that's a very simple way and a rudimentary way of just getting that kind of nicely brought out and smoothed out. Let's go back to our camera here and zoom in. This doesn't look very good right now, but as we work on things and manipulate them, it will look a little bit better, I promise. We do have a little bit of a extrude happening here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click this. I'm going to go inset. I'm going to take these two. I'm going to go scale. There we go. And I'm going to take this one. I'm going to go GX. Take this one and go GZ. Take this one GZ. And now we can take this whole face here, go extrude back, and then extrude forward, scale. And all we're doing with that is just adding a little bit more detail very simply. The last thing that we need to add here is getting this popped out, and we could also get that popped out as well. Let's add a loop cut here to the top of this. Now we can go 3, boom, 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 and we can extrude this. But first, let's add the loop cuts to get into here. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab these two. I'm going to go inset just until that bottom line ends up right there. I'm going to take these two, boom, 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 scale these on the x-axis. That one's lining up. Now we deselect that, GX on this one. That one is lining up, GZ. That one is lining up. So now we hit 3, we grab all of these faces, and we just extrude this out. Now this does stick out, as we can see the shadow right there, a little bit more than this does. So let's deselect all of this, and let's extrude that out even more. Now we can hit tab, and that is looking great. Last thing that we would want to do is to hit 2, select our edge here, and we're going to GY, pull it back a little bit, and then extrude back on the y-axis. On this back side, I'm going to hit Q. We're going to grid fill, and that works just fine. Now we do have those UV issues that we've had on all other of our low poly models. That's totally fine. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get out of edit mode, and I'm going to hit shade auto smooth. That will add some nice rounding to our object. If there's some faces that are extruded or pushed out a little too much, we can just go right back into edit mode, and we can just try and relax these. Select this loop, and I'm going to go GY. I'm going to pull it up until it gives a little bit rounder. And then we're going to do the same with this, GY. Just get some nice rounding on that. Remember, this object is going to be at the back of our scene, off on the walls. It does not need to be very high detail. This right here, we might as well try and get extruded just to give some little extra shadow details that we can get. Now, we do have some funky things going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the knife tool. I'm going to select this vertice. I'm going to come up, and I'm going to select this vertice, and I'm going to come out, and I'm going to hit enter to make that cut. Then I'm going to hit 2, grab this, X, I, and that is going to dissolve that edge. Now we can come in here. I'm going to inset this, scale on the Z axis, GZ, and we can even go 2, GX. Let's go like this, 3. Let's see how this looks if we just scale this down on the Z axis a little bit, and then we just extrude. Tab. I think that will add enough detail where we won't have any issues with that. We can also reproject what this is by going on here and hitting U, unwrap, and we're going to hit cube projection, and then we're going to hit this as well, U, unwrap, cube projection. So let's take this, hit all, scale it down, rotate, scale it down, G, we can put that right there. That will be fine. Then we need to come back to this, all, scale down, G, scale down, boom. Set that on there. Now the top part, this top face, I'm going to select that. I'm going to go all, scale, just so it fits that. And again, looks kind of funky up close, but when this is off in the distance on a wall, no one is going to know the difference. These are the things that you don't need to spend too much time on. You want to spend all of your creativity on the actual composition of the scene. You don't need hyper detail in these low poly assets at all. One last thing I would like to add here is insetting this face. So I'm going to actually hit this. I'm going to go inset. I'm going to go GZ, scale X. I'm going to take this one edge, GX, just take it out a little bit. 3, extrude, and we're just going to bring it in a little bit. And that gives another nice little bit of detail there. Makes things really happy. Cool, let's get on to getting that texture finished. Go into the shader editor. We're totally used to this workflow now. Remove that alpha, select your image, Shift D, click the 2 so that it doesn't affect the first one. Set it to non-color. Come over here, we're going into a color ramp. Come over here, we're going into a bump height. Bump height into normal, distance 0.20, strength 0.31. Those are just my personal favorite settings. And there we go, we have that set up. Now, here, this is made out of probably a metal alloy, but I think they usually look pretty rough. So if you want to add a little bit of metallic in, you can. I would just keep that roughness above the 0.5 mark. That will look pretty realistic. And you have your box for your scene. Is it very pretty? No. Is it meant to be? No. It's meant to sit at the back of a scene just to add some kind of detail. Everyone walks by these throughout their life, at least here in America. Every house has one. As long as you have gas to your house, you have one of these. Something this simple is a great asset to add to your library so that you can create some cool stuff. Last but not least, right-click your object. Mark as asset, save your project, and all of your assets will then be available to you inside the library that you saved it in. I'm saving mine in Street Assets, and I've even created this wonderful collection of objects that includes 2 of the objects that I made today. Wonderful assets that you can just slap on walls and they work, they look great, they add enough detail into your scenes that you don't have to worry about it. I spent a little bit more time on this one and the geometry did not end up any better. So save yourself the time, follow this tutorial. See you guys in the next episode.